Today's sermon is actually going to be the conclusion of the love preaching series we did back in February. We kind of skipped a Sunday here. Last Sunday we were celebrating with the Scouts, so that sermon was preached specifically for Scout Sunday, but now we're finally going to wrap up that preaching series on love. Before I do, I'm going to start with a story from my college years. In college, I was asked to write a paper and answer one simple question. Which type of love is the true Christian love? Of course, the expected answer, was agape, and God's unconditional agape. And all of my classmates, every one of them, wrote a paper on agape. And honestly, I was supposed to do the same. But as far back as my college days, I would take a left-hand turn. It just was always in my DNA. As far back as my college days, I would always take risks. And actually, as a philosophy major, I would rarely write my papers on the obvious answer. I would always dive deeper, discover a different perspective, a perspective that few people had ever considered. This is that paper I wrote when I was 22 years old. It's right here. You guys are going to think I never threw anything away. My Pinewood Derby last week and now the paper. In the case of this paper, I was trying to look at love from a very different perspective than the obvious course that was expected. Instead of just writing a paper about agape, I invented my own new word for the paper, Philiagperos. It's the fusion of philia, brotherly love, agape, unconditional love, eros, passionate love, and I'm not one to brag at all, but I did get an A in the paper, so I just want to say. And I got an A not just because I invented a new word, but because I made a good argument that Christian love is not just one of these options, but all three working together in divine harmony. And I'm well aware that there are some in the congregation who don't like when I get into my intellectual preaching style and I get academic from the pulpit. I can tell you, if you don't like some of my academic sermons, you would have hated this paper. Absolutely. It's only 2 pages, well, front and back, single space, but you would have hated it. I reread this paper assuming it would provide a nice foundation for the sermon. The paper was so deep and intellectual, I could not use any of this paper for the sermon. I kid you not, the only word that is the same from the paper to the sermon I wrote now is Philiagperos. I had to rewrite everything else. So I know there are a couple people here who do like taking a deeper dive even. So I actually printed copies of that paper. If you would like to see the intellectual deep dive version of this sermon, you're free. I have copies. Just see me after the service. So here's the sermon version of that paper. In Greek, we all know, especially after the past several sermons throughout February, there are different words for love, and each carrying its own depth and meaning. But oftentimes, not just in Christianity, but everywhere in life, things get compartmentalized. It's either this or it's that, and we define things in clear categories of belief. But I believe that God is calling us to love in a fully integrated way. Philiagperos is that love, the inseparable intertwining of all of these that are dependent on each other, not separate from each other. Agape is the divine love, perfect, unconditional, unending. It's the love that we strive our best to emulate, to the best of our ability at least. To love the same way Jesus showed throughout his life. Agape love is the highest bar of love, to love our enemies, to forgive without even hesitation, to serve without seeking any reward. When Jesus commands us to love one another as I have loved you, he's calling us to agape. It's not just about being kind and affectionate towards others. It's a radical, all-encompassing love that just gives and gives and gives, expecting nothing in return. Agape is the love that looks beyond one's own personal gain and loves purely for the sake of love itself. This is the love that led Jesus to the cross. It's the love that looks at those who betray and abandon and harm us. Yet still we say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Agape love is the love that never holds grudges, does not seek revenge, and does not waver even in the face of hardship. It's the love that persists even when we are not reciprocated. The love that chooses to see an image of God in every person they meet, regardless of how they treat us back. Agape calls us to radical hospitality, to love not just those who love us back, but also love those who are difficult to love. It's the love that turns the other cheek, that walks the extra mile, that offers grace in the face of injustice. Yet as high and holy as agape love is, it cannot stand alone. A faith that only embraces agape love is a faith that becomes stagnant, purely theoretical love, even burdensome, trying to love in a way that may be out of our grasp. Without philia and eros, agape can feel distant, even impossible to truly live out as a human. If we try to love purely through agape, without the passion of eros and without the warmth and connection of philia, we may burn out, feeling as though we're striving to attain an ideal without the fuel to really sustain that quest. Agape is truly the foundation of Christian love. Let's make no mistake about that. But it's not the whole structure of love. Without eros, our love lacks passion and energy. Without philia, our love lacks connection and community. Together, agape, eros, and philia create a complete, life-giving love. A love that not only reflects God, but actually transforms the world itself. What would Christian love be without eros? This is the passionate, energizing love that drives us as Christians into action. It's the fire that compels us to act in this world, to serve, to create, to challenge the injustice that's out there, and to stand in solidarity with those in need. Eros is often misunderstood in Christian thought. Too often it's just reduced down to romantic love. But in reality, it's much more than that. Eros is a passionate force that drives us to seek God's presence in our life and in the world around us, to encourage us to pursue justice and to stand in solidarity with the oppressed, to love with an intensity that transforms both ourselves and transforms the world around us. Without eros, our love can become passive, sitting in the pews, talking about love, having this love in our heart, but never taking action. But when eros is fully embraced, it fuels our ministries and fuels our outreach and our devotion to God's call in our lives. It's eros that drives this church to serve food at Matthew's Hope and West Orange Christian Center. It's not simply duty or obligation that calls us to these ministries. It's a deep, burning desire to make a difference in this world, to see hunger eradicated, to bring dignity to those who are struggling, to witness transformation in the lives of those people we serve. It was eros that gave us the passion and courage to become an open and affirming congregation. We didn't take this step just out of mere tolerance and kindness. We did so out of a fierce commitment to justice and inclusion, to love that refuses to exclude anyone from the embrace of God. It's eros that compels us to reach out to our Hispanic community around us, letting them know that in these challenging times, Windermere Union Church can be a place of peace and safety. This is not just about outreach. It's about a fire that burns within us, a fire that drives us to create a world where all feel welcome, where fear is replaced with sanctuary. Eros also fuels our children's ministry, inspiring us to create dynamic, engaging place for the next generation of this church. Without passion, the children's ministry is nothing but babysitting. But when Eros is at work, it creates a space where children can encounter God's love in ways that are exciting and connects with them at their age level, something that is joyful and deeply meaningful for these kids. And next week, Eros is what motivates this church to love our neighbor as we partner with the Hindu temple next door to create a meaningful Holy festival. It's not just an event that we're going to have at the church. It's a declaration that love reaches across religious and cultural divides. That celebration can bring people together in dynamic ways, and that our faith is alive, and when it actively engages in a diverse world that God created, love explodes with passion. Eros is love in motion. It's the force that moves us out of our comfort zone, sitting in the pews pontificating about the agape love and how loving we are. The Eros love moves us into the world. The passion that refuses to let injustice go unchallenged. And it refuses to let this church become stagnant, not really taking action on those things we talk about in our Sunday school classes and Bible studies. Let's take action. Let's be Eros in this world. Without Eros, we might believe in love. We might truly believe we're a loving church, but we never act on it unless we also embrace Eros. Eros is what makes love a dangerous force against injustice. It's what led Jesus to overturn the tables. It's what caused Jesus to challenge the religious elite, to heal on the Sabbath despite the opposition. And it's what has fueled great movements for justice in the history of humanity. It's the power behind the prophets, the saints, the reformers, and the peacemakers throughout history. Eros is not passive. It's not content with things as they are. It burns with a holy urgency, compelling us to love not just in word, but to love in deed. This church is filled with Eros. It is the present in our worship service, the energy of our ministries at this church, and the boldness of our mission. It is Eros that pushes us forward daily and keeps this church from complacency. That reminds us that love is not just something we feel or talk about. Love is something we do. And when we embrace Eros alongside agape and philia, we become Philiagperos, the complete dynamic love that God calls us to. And finally, we haven't talked about what would a Christian be without philia. The brotherly or sisterly love is what makes community. It's the glue that holds us together. It's the warmth that makes Windermere Union Church feel like home. Philia is the love that turns strangers into families, that transforms a collection of individuals into a true community of faith. It's the love that reminds us that we are not alone, that we belong to each other, and that in our togetherness, we find strength. It's the love of friendship, of companionship, and of deep, meaningful relationships. It's the love that allows us to share joys and sorrows, to celebrate with one another's victories, and to bear one another's burdens. Without this brotherly, sisterly love, faith would be an isolated experience, a solitary walk. But with this love, faith is shared. It's a journey that we all take together, holding hand in hand, heart in heart. It's what makes our passing of the peace filled with such genuine joy and connection. And it's also what makes the passing of the peace last so long without anyone sitting down on time. It's not just a moment in our service. It's a sacred exchange, a reminder that we are truly seen and known. It's why our greetings are not just polite formalities, but they are moments of real affection, where smiles are sincere, handshakes are firm, and those hugs are heartfelt. And it's this kind of love that provides warmth and welcome to every visitor that steps through these doors. A church can have beautiful architecture, inspiring sermons, great music, but without philia, it will never feel like home. It's what makes Windermere Union Church a place where people walk in as strangers, but leave as family. It's in the warmth of our welcome, the kindness of our conversations, and the genuine love that is felt in this place from the moment someone enters this sacred space. It's this love that radiates through our caring team and the Stephen ministers, who support and uplift those in need at our church. When we have grief that is heavy, when life feels overwhelming, it's the phone calls and the check-ins. It's the meals that are delivered to the sick, prayers lifted on behalf of another. It's the way we refuse to let anyone suffer alone. It's the heartbeat of our fellowship, the love that fills our gathering with laughter. And it's the stories we share and the memories we create. It's the bonds that deepen over time, and it's the unspoken understanding that is this church. You are loved. You're loved not because of what you do, but simply because you are. It's the love that builds relationships, strengthens bonds, fosters true belonging. It's the kind of love that looks beyond anyone's differences for any reason. And it's the ability for us to find the divine spark in everyone we meet. Without this love, we may still gather for worship. We may still say a prayer. We may still serve, but we'll lack deep connections. Deep connections that make this place not just a place we attend for worship, but it's this kind of love that makes this place a family we belong to. Philia transforms a congregation of a group of individuals into a community united in faith and love. It's what allows us to embrace diversity and see beyond our differences. In a world that's so often divided, what makes Windermere Union Church a place of people from all walks of life that come together in respect and mutual care. It also is how we extend outward into our community to foster friendship beyond these walls. It's the love that invites others into this community to bring them in to be a part of our family. It helps us grow, expand our ministries, and deepen our impact in the world. Imagine a church where love isn't just a word we say. It's not just a badge of honor that we brag about. We're a loving church. What if we actually live out that love in the spirit of Philiagperos? We're a church where agape inspires us to love even our enemies to the highest level of eternal love without condition. And where we as a church embrace eros, the eros that fuels us with the passion to act for justice and transformation in this world. And we are a church where Philia makes us people who embrace each other, to make each other feel seen, heard, and embraced. This is the kind of love that can transform the world. And the Bible tells us the greatest commandment is to love one another. It's the very essence of God, but it's not just one-dimensional. It's rich and full and dynamic. Philiagperos is not just a made-up word. It's the reality of divine love in action. It's the love that embraces friendships, sacrifices for other, and burns with a holy passion. So let us together as a church step into this love. Let us be Philiagperos for the world, a people who fully love, completely, and without limit. Amen.